Becky Mayer, and welcome to Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. Transitions. How do you deal with different things in your life? How do you transition from one thing to another? I use the metaphor of triathlons, something that I do. And in a triathlon, first you swim, then you get to a area that you change, your transition area, and then you're going to bicycle. And then you get to transition again, and then you're going to run. And that is a metaphor for our lives. We're always changing from one thing to another, and hopefully changing for the better. We have an amazing guest today. This is the second of a two-part show. And John Guider is our guest. And John is an author, a commercial photographer, a artist, and an adventurer. And the amazing part of the latter part of his lifetime now is that he has been, well, first he was in a canoe and he canoed up the Mississippi, and then he's been doing parts of the Great Loop, which I have just learned about, which is going around 6,500 miles circumventing America, and he built a boat. So that's what this show is going to be about today, about what he is doing with this boat, with this adventure, and the utterly amazing photos that he's taking. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And give us a little intro on how in your life you decided to just break off and get in a canoe and then build a boat.
Well, I will. I was a commercial photographer for 30 years, and the industry was going through transitions as it moved to digital, and I was going through transitions, and deep in my heart, I wanted more to be an artist than I did to run a commercial studio. So I wanted to find a project that was solely my own and nobody else's. When you're a commercial photographer, it's a very creative experience, but it's also a group collaboration. And in order to satisfy your client's needs, it's important to be within the current trends with your work. And so after 30 years of following the trends and making those transitions, I really felt that I had done as much as I could artistically as a commercial photographer. And so I saw no reason to really continue. And so I decided I wanted to do a project that was my own, unlike anything anybody else was doing. I loved nature. I loved, I just loved the water and that environment. And I also wanted to photograph, so I needed some kind of vehicle that would carry 30 pounds of camera. And I realized that there's no way I could walk. The famous book, Walk Across America, that was just such a wonderful book, but there is no way that I could accomplish that. And yeah, I even thought of a horse and a buggy, but then that took on some other considerations too. And so I just decided on the water. I love to travel. I traveled all over the world and met wonderful people and put cameras to their faces, and they were very receptive, but we couldn't communicate verbally. And I felt an emptiness when I got through the shoot, because I didn't know these people, and we couldn't talk, and we couldn't communicate. So that's when I started thinking of America, and what what it was there that I could explore. And, you know, the United States is going through such a transition. People are on the highways, they're on the interstate, and the river has gotten to be something of an obstacle, something people cross over. And I wanted to go back to the time when the rivers were the highway. And so in a way, what I wanted to do was to rediscover America the way our forefathers first saw it.
By the river.
By the river. And to experience, in a way, what they experienced. And give me a sense of time and place. Why am I here at this? What, is this a good time? Am I lucky? Did they have it better 200 years ago when things were simpler? And it was something that really weighed on me. And then just the peacefulness of traveling for days at a time. And
by yourself? By
myself. And, you know, there are concerns, but I was surprised that there's a security in nature that you sometimes don't find in the city. And there's rationalities in nature that you don't always find in the city. And for some reason, even though the environment was strange, I always felt it was in me, that this was where I needed to be. And so when a problem came up, it was dealt with. And then the nice thing about having some problem in nature is that once you deal with it, it's over and gone. In the city, you have a problem and it can come back to you again and again and again, and create stress. Usually in nature, when something dangerous happens, it's so immediate, you don't have time to be stressed. And then once it's over, there's no reason to dwell on it. So there's a lot of benefits that I found, and then a lot of opportunities as a photographer. That I knew there were a lot of people who were canoeing the Mississippi. I knew a lot of people who were taking small boats out in the ocean, but they weren't doing it as artists. They were doing it as adventurers. And I wanted to document. And so I brought my cameras and I protected my film. And it was just an incredible experience. I'd never canoed really before. I never camped. The first night, I didn't even know what a campsite was supposed to look like. And
that was when you canoed?
When I started canoeing, yeah. And I had no idea what a proper campsite would be, especially along the riverbanks. And storms were coming in, and I didn't know if I was going to get flooded out. You know, it was really interesting.
It was interesting. Were you scared?
I was concerned. And the concern energized me, but really after 8-10 hours of paddling, one is so exhausted that it's easy to fall asleep.
Wow. And
so there became just this natural rhythm of rowing and paddling until to exhaustion, going to bed and waking up and doing it the next day. And it was healthy. It was extremely healthy. And when I started, I was having alignment problems. My my shoulder was sticking, and
this was before you started canoeing?
Before I started canoeing, I was just having a lot of bronchitis. I was getting sick a lot, And that was one of the motivations too. I think if I was going to do it, I had to do it now. And so I just liked that romantic notion of walking out of my farmhouse in Franklin, where I lived at the time, going down to the creek, putting a canoe in it, and just paddling it as far as I could go.
Off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Yes.
And 3 months later, I ended up in New Orleans.
So that first trip, that was the canoe trip from your farmhouse in Franklin, Tennessee, down and then down the Mississippi, eventually to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what you documented. That became a book?
Well, I paddled to New Orleans, and the transition was incredible. When I started, you know, I'd land in Clarksville or Paducah, and I reward myself by taking a hotel.
A hotel.
And spending 2 days of relaxing and washing up and cleaning and doing normal stuff and sleeping in a real bed, and you know, that was my reward. By the time I'd gotten to Greenville, Mississippi, and they have beautiful hotels next to the levee, I was so one with my canoe and my tent that I refused to leave it.
Wow.
And I got a little further down, and I was kind of concerned as to how I was going to tell my wife I never wanted to sleep in a bed again, because I was so comfortable sleeping on the ground.
Wow.
And in the process, I lost 30 pounds.
You lost 30 pounds?
Yes. My energy level skyrocketed
up.
And
what about your bronchitis?
All of that went away.
Went away.
And miraculously, it was just phenomenal. You know, I still had some asthma medication, and but on the third journey, I ran out of it, and I was so far away from any city that I dealt with it. And before I left, I was on I was on over $300 a month of medication.
Wow.
When I returned, I haven't had any basically since. I go to a doctor once a year.
Isn't that amazing? That is terrific.
Yeah, so from a weekly doctor visit to a doctor visit.
Wow.
Once every year.
Well, I understand you did the canoe thing, and that was your original thing. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the Great Loop.
Sure.
And where that is, what that is.
Well, over subsequent years, I canoed the entirety of the Mississippi, about 2,500 miles in a canoe. 2,500
miles in the canoe.
And I was so the thing was so life-changing. Not only did I photograph, but I was compelled to write. So I wrote a book, and the Tennessee State Museum and the Mississippi River Museum co-sponsored a museum show that toured around the region to different museums. And once I was done with that, I decided I wanted to continue to challenge myself to do things I'd never done before. And so this time, I'd never really built anything before. So in the spring of 2009, I built my own boat, and it was a 14-foot rowboat with a sail on it. And I launched it at Shelby Park on the ramp.
In Nashville, Tennessee.
In Nashville, Tennessee. Ah. And 2 months later, following the same course, I ended up in the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow.
And I stopped that was 2 months. I stopped for the year. In 2010, I came back and put the boat in the same place where I stopped and followed the coastline and made it down to Sarasota, Florida.
Okay.
And that was daunting because when you go around the Big Bend of Florida, there's no intercoastal. It's all open, exposed water. And I'd never sailed in the ocean before. And talking about being scared. I was scared. It was also the year of the oil spill.
Oh.
And I had to leave prematurely because the oil was coming eastward. And they said if I didn't leave now that everything would be blocked and I'd never get to go. So I started about 2 weeks ahead of the oil spill, and I got to monitor the towns as they prepared for it to come in. And so that kind of made it really interesting. And then 2011 I started in Sarasota. I went all the way down to Key West and then up the entire coast of Florida.
Okay.
And made it to Cumberland Island, which is right on the Georgia-Florida base. And that was really amazing to sail in the Keys, and to think that I could sail from Nashville all the way down to Key West was pretty neat.
That's very neat. And that was, now you say the word sail, but you could row also. So the combo?
I sailed and rowed. In 2011, I went from Cumberland Island up through Georgia, the coastline, Chesapeake Bay to Annapolis, and that was a lot of rowing too, because in the intercoastal of Georgia, there's just little channels that you know where the wind wouldn't come. And there were a lot of storms to deal with. Down south, I had the alligators, I got and the sharks, and I got attacked by both.
They attacked your boat?
Yeah, they attacked the boat. The alligator in Baton Rouge, and the shark.
Did you have to beat them off, or with a rope?
No,
or something?
it was one of those things that happened so fast. I was rowing on the Mississippi. And when you're rowing, of course, you're looking back, and all of a sudden, this alligator comes and tail wallops the boat and shakes it. And I turned in time to see its head rear up over the boat, and I was fixing to jump out of the boat, but it just dived down into the water, and then it was silence.
Did you grab your camera?
No, I mean, that's kind of the reason why I write, is that these things happen and the camera's just not, it's of no use. So I rode for a while, and then all of a sudden I see this big alligator head just pop out of the water and just stare at me. And its head was about 2 feet. People said it was about an 8-foot alligator.
Wow.
And then in Florida, I was crossing from the Everglades, the tip of Florida, over to the Keys, over to Marathon, and it was a 40-mile crossing, Florida Bay.
Wow, that's a long.
And I thought I could sail it, but the wind died, and then I got caught in the tides, and learning about the tides was very interesting too. But so around midnight, I was basically in the middle of nowhere. It was pitch black. The clouds had covered the moon. There were no lights. And I rested with my oars in the water. And the oar is about 8 inches wide. And something with a mouth big enough to lock onto the oar grabbed it and shook it so hard it wrenched my shoulder.
Oh my heavens.
And I fought with it, and then finally I guess it decided the oar wasn't edible.
Right.
So it let go, and I started to row again. And I rowed for about another hour, and I had to rest, but this time I put the oars out of the water. Something came up and hit the rudder and spun the boat 180 degrees.
Golly, it was determined, whatever it was.
Yeah, so I knew I was being stalked, and I just about convinced myself that if I ran fast enough, I could walk on water. But just to have to sit there and take that.
Wow.
It was an incredible experience.
Yes, and that's a hyper-focused thing. I mean, all you can think about is where you are right then,
Yeah.
right,
And the initial reaction is to run, and of course,
what are you going to do?
yeah, you're stuck.
Wow.
So you know, I had experiences like that, and the experiences in the storms. But like I said, when they're over, they're over. And
so how did this affect you, these trips? And as I understand it, there's been 6 of the trips of the Great Loop
yes.
so far, and you have 1 more to go.
Yes.
But on a spiritual basis, on an inner self basis, you know, there you are basically alone, but you had also mentioned to me that sometimes strangers would help you. And was there some kind of spiritual bond with some of these folks?
Well, it's interesting. The spirituality does come from being alone and being alone in nature. To see in intimate detail daily what the earth is, it's the creation and the beauty, and just to marvel. You know, I'm going so slow that instead of going down the interstate and seeing a green field of forest, I'm going down and I'm seeing individual trees and individual plants, and each tree has its own look and its own personality. And to just travel that way, it would be hard for me to believe that there isn't a God. It's just the earth is too perfect, and it's too beautiful, and it's it does fulfill me spiritually. What my encounter with strangers were as equally profound. I had strangers literally pull me out of the water and put me in their house for 2 or 3 days at a time.
And they didn't know you?
They didn't know me, but people fed me. They took me to the store. In fact, the boat has broken. The mast is broken in half. I've broken an oar. The rudder fell off in the middle of the Mississippi. And people come and they fix me. It's almost by providence. And really, the only reason I'm alive is by the charity of strangers through that. And it's given me hope for the world. You know, it's hard to be pessimistic when you see such goodness.
And you've felt such goodness. That's amazing. And I wanted to show some of these amazing images, if we can kind of.
Oops, you lost one.
Yep, we're back. Okay. This image, can we see this? Yeah. Tell us about this. This is amazing to me.
Oh, thank you. That was the last journey, and that's in a little town called Port Severn, right on Georgia Bay. And I had that was my second night there, getting ready to go out into the Great Lakes. And I photographed a storm coming in at sunset, and then just sort of enhanced it with Photoshop. But it is a good representation of what I saw.
Wow, that's just utterly amazing, and I'd like to show a couple of the others.
And that's also up in Ontario, a place called Trenton. And here again, I landed in Trenton. I went to the marina, told the guy my story. He didn't charge me. He gave me a slip, and allowed me to pitch my tent. So, so instead of just sort of being thrown out in the cold, so to speak, I had a place. And you know, another thing about this journey, financially, I almost make money by going on the journey because I save so much.
You save so much. How do you save money?
Well, because I don't have any gas expense. I don't have any electric bills. I don't have any hotel expense. So basically, I feed myself, and every now and then I'll spend some money at a marina docking the boat. So I figure my daily expenses are around $20 a day.
Well,
So I can go out on a 2-month adventure for very, very little money, for what most people would spend in a week.
Wow. I wanted to show a couple more of these images here.
That was a storm coming in off the North Atlantic, and I was on Peanut Island. And Peanut Island is it's above Fort Lauderdale, around West Palm Beach, and that was the island that John F. Kennedy's air raid shelter was put. And after the Cold War, they opened the island as a park and allowed camping. So I had a camping place, and I watched that storm. It's a time exposure, and watched it as it came in.
Wow. Now, after you have one more loop to go, which is next year, 2015.
Yes.
Right, of the Great Loop. And then you mentioned after that you still would like to maybe follow John Donaldson, who discovered Nashville and from Virginia to...
Well, he came down, from the French Broad River to the Tennessee to the Ohio, and then actually upstream to the Cumberland, and then upstream to Nashville.
Upstream, that was tough.
Yeah, and this was in a flat bottom boat that sometimes they just had to pull from the shore.
Wow.
And I just am fascinated with the contrast. There's I think there is a journal kept by his son, and then there are artist renderings of that air, and then just to imagine what John Donaldson would have seen, thought if he'd come around a bend and seen the UT Stadium, or coming into Nashville and seeing the Batman Tower.
Right.
I mean, just so much has changed since it was, a little, log fort 200 years ago. And
well, it just seems that your life is so much more adventuresome on the other after 50 than it was before. And
sure.
It's just amazing that if people really want to see your photos, they can get on your website, right?
Yeah.
And that is what?
JohnGuider.com.
JohnGuider.com.
And then there's pictures at the Reimer Gallery downtown.
Okay.
And it just Google my name and things will come up.
Well, thank you so much for explaining your wonderful adventures, your art, your composing, author, your books, everything, and we appreciate it. Thank you for being on Transitions.
Well, it's my pleasure.